Hi everybody, Dr. Suneel Dhand, internal medicine physician. Welcome to another video. I talked very recently about the extreme health dangers of a big gut. It is not something benign, particularly when it comes to a big belly in a male, because this represents visceral fat. It's not benign either in a female, but I am working currently a lot with men on reversing this very dangerous problem. It's not something to laugh at. Haha, they have a big belly. That's really funny. It's not. It's a very dangerous health condition to have, associated with many other chronic conditions. And the reality is that it is very reversible in only several weeks, or big progress can be made in several weeks if one is motivated to do so in a very natural, sustainable, holistic way that, dare I say, can even be fun as well as anybody sees progress. And I want to talk in this video about some other reasons, aside from the obvious, why big guts have become ubiquitous in many people. Obviously, I'm focusing mainly on males, but the same thing applies to females. Let me share this video with you from the 1930s. Take a look and tell me how many big guts you see in the men. You're welcome to look as well at the ladies if you want to, but take a look at this. There you go. How many big bellies did you see in that video? Zero? And that's fairly typical of the 1930s. In fact, it was fairly typical for the few decades after that, up until the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and especially the last 20 years, when obesity rates have exploded. And this has happened for many reasons, but up until only relatively recently in human history, human beings looked like that video. What on earth has happened to us? And rather than beat the usual drum that I beat about the overconsumption of ultra-processed foods, sugars, and carbohydrates, I want to focus on some other, less talked about reasons for why big bellies are so ubiquitous now, everywhere you look. Number one, quite simply, people walked around a lot more than they do today. Now, back in the 1930s, gyms were not everywhere like they are today. There weren't exercise classes everywhere. People simply moved a lot more than they do today. You cannot avoid this simple law of thermodynamics. Obviously, it's thrown off a bit these days because of ultra-processed fake foods and the terrible damage that they do to the body. But nevertheless, if you are consistently consuming more calories than you burn off, you will put on weight and you will store excess fat. That is a law of nature. And back then in the 1930s, people would walk absolutely everywhere. They were not as dependent on motorized vehicles. They didn't sit as much on the couch as they do today. So that is the first reason to highlight right there. Number two, a more toxic environment in general. I'm not talking about the toxic food environment, which is bad enough. I'm talking about all of the other toxins that are around us. People live in more urbanized areas now. There's a lot more pollution. There are a lot more chemicals everywhere, including in drinking water and even other things which are not talked about anywhere nearly enough, like radiation from electronic devices. All of these things will act as endocrine disruptors. They are not natural. With every passing decade, we move more and more away from nature, and we are surrounded by more and more toxins. And undoubtedly, that is having an effect on people's bodily systems. And number three, stress, which is absolutely everywhere these days. Modern mainstream culture is rife with stress. And think about this, because by almost any measure, we are much more comfortable than our historical ancestors. But yet, millions of people feel the need to seek help because of mental health symptoms, which are often related to stress, whether it's anxiety, whether it's depression. What on earth has happened to us? If we think back to the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, they used to deal with a lot more stresses. They had world wars. Young men were called up in a draft to go and fight. That's a big stress for families to undergo. Indeed, a big stress for the young man who is going out and fighting and facing a fair chance of dying. And by all measures, we are a lot more economically comfortable than we were 100 years ago. So why on earth are we more stressed? Stress wreaks absolute havoc on bodily systems. If your cortisol and adrenaline levels are chronically elevated, it will make any health effort that much more difficult. In fact, when I'm talking to people about weight loss, metabolic health, we often spend a lot of time talking about stress. Often we do group coaching sessions to deal with this specifically, and I'm okay with that because I'm a doctor, and stress is a core part of health and well-being. It is so important that anyone who is suffering from stress firstly identifies this as a problem and then sets in motion an action plan to deal with that stress. It's easier said than done, but the first step is to recognize this, because when it comes to metabolic health, when it comes to weight loss, if your cortisol levels and adrenaline levels are chronically elevated, you are really facing an uphill struggle to lose weight or do whatever else you want to do, reverse any other inflammatory disease. And closely linked to this is the issue of sleep. We are sleeping less and less peacefully with each passing decade, and sleep is absolutely crucial. It's when our bodies rejuvenate, when they replenish. If we aren't sleeping well, then our metabolic health is in extreme danger. So those are three big reasons then, aside from the obvious, why people really struggle these days with weight gain, with having big bellies. As you saw in that video, it was very uncommon to be overweight, to have a large gut a few decades ago. And it's so important to address this problem in a holistic way, which is sustainable, free of big pharma, which is only going to come with a whole load of other toxic problems. Thanks everyone for watching. Let me know your thoughts below. If you are a man between the ages of 40 and 60 that is interested in losing your gut, check out my health program down below, Lose a Gut and Level Up. Also check out my other general lifestyle medicine course and my free downloads. All of those links are down below. Take care everyone. Hit the like button if you like this video and the bell button for more similar videos in the future. We will speak again very soon.